Hello, everyone. We at Simon & Schuster India are very proud to be publishing Lockdown Liaisons by Shobhaa. The books will be released every Saturday from May 30th onwards for 6 weeks in a unique digital-only format via the Kindle Store, Google Bookstore, and the Juggernaut Books app. So make sure you do check it out. Today we have Shobhaa, author, columnist, and one of India's most respected opinion shapers, in conversation with best-selling author Ashwin Sanghi. They will be talking about Lockdown Liaisons, a collection of short stories that explores the shifting world of human emotions in the uncertain times that the world is going through right now. I will now hand it over to both of you.
So, thank you, Abhay, and it's such a pleasure to be here with you, Shobhaa, and that too on such an important day. So my congratulations to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be doing this with you because it's really kind of you to itna sara time nikal ke to be in conversation with me. But I'm too excited because we've done in conversations in the past and the roles were a little reversed at that time.
Absolutely.
So it's lovely. Yeah, it's just lovely. It's like coming full circle.
So I can, well, everyone they can see Leaving and Other Stories by Shobhaa. And of course, it's available on Kindle and of course on several other platforms. And I'm given to understand that this is there are 6 installments over 6 weeks.
That's right, Ashwin. It started off very organically when I started to just document what I was feeling. There was no plan in place whatsoever. It's just that all of us in different spheres responded in different ways to what we were going through. There was confusion, there was a lot of insecurity, there was uncertainty. I mean, the world had been turned upside down. In India, it was 4 hours and suddenly we're faced with, what is being described as the largest lockdown ever in the history of the world. So I felt as a writer it was important to chronicle what I was feeling, but with no intentions of it turning into what it has. And I'm so delighted that it has. It came out really very organically. The stories started to jump out of my head and I started to write them at my usual kind of manic and furious pace. And so there we are. I'm still at it because book 3 is kind of complete. But there are 3 more books to go, and I want to write it as we go along.
Okay, so for you, this almost in some ways is catharsis, right? I mean, it's a way of dealing with where you are.
Well, in many ways, yes, because we all needed to find that one creative outlet to deal with all our own mixed emotions, what we were going through. Initially, it was panic, and that panic was probably emerging out of ignorance because we had no idea where this virus had suddenly come from. There were all these theories flying around, and the fact that it made each one of us extremely vulnerable. I mean, that nobody was going to be spared, that we would have to change our way of life, as it were, on a permanent basis.
Yes.
So yes, initially that's what the trigger was really that. But as a storyteller, I mean, I've always been a keen observer of how people respond in different situations. And the pandemic was an almost unbeatable kind of moment in history, speaking a bit cold-bloodedly, that I couldn't let it just go without recording what everybody around me was going through, not just what I was going through.
And each one going through it in different ways. And that comes across very clearly. I finished reading the 4 stories yesterday. Yes. And each one is very, very different. Somewhere you have a TV executive who's wanting to run away to Dubai. And somewhere you have a construction worker in Dharavi wanting to exit the slums. And a gay woman who wants to run away from her parents. And a man who wants to actually exit his marriage. So in that sense, everyone is wanting that escape route. But actually what came across to me was really the fact that all of us are trapped. More than leaving. I know the word leaving is there in the title, but it's almost feeling trapped.
Yes. So the feeling of that entire claustrophobic feeling that the world is dealing with right now. I mean, it's also, in many ways, it's like a pandemic of emotions. That's how I looked at it. Apart from the virus, it's what's happening to you psychologically. It's a pandemic of going on in our hearts. It's not just a physical manifestation of a virus that is scaring us, but it's also what we are, the emotions it's throwing up. And to be able to kind of climb into the skins of different people was, as a writer, it was challenging, of course, but very important to do that. And the format came to me quite naturally. Every single story is more like you said, you use the word cathartic, but it's like a monologue. It's in first person. So every person is actually talking directly to the reader in a voice that is that person's voice, giving expression to what they're experiencing and the choices they're making, because suddenly we are confronted with the kind of choices that a lot of us living in very comfortable, complacent cocoons. We've never had to question any of these aspects of our lives. And young people in particular are so vulnerable. They're losing their jobs. They're losing their sense of identity. They're losing what defines their world, their comfort zone. All of a sudden, sab hil gaya hai. So I wanted to try and echo those feelings, those emotions, those sentiments through each and every story.
And I must tip my hat to you, even though I'm not wearing one, but I must tell you that they struck a chord. All 4 stories struck a chord, because to a certain extent, I don't know, my personal feeling is that there is also this underlying fear that even once this lockdown is over, we are not going to go back to the same world. So I'm just wondering, to a certain extent, whether this is all playing into, for example, for someone like me, these last 60 days has been about sort of developing various story ideas. But there is that underlying fear everywhere that, the world as I'm describing this may not be there by the time this book comes out or by the time this story comes out. I'm wondering whether that's playing into your thought process.
Not in quite the same way, but I am looking at, we are going to have to pause various buttons in our own life and in our professional life even more so, because that is going to dramatically change. I mean, the world of publishing is going to be changing, has changed, is changing as we speak.
Yep.
And with the bookstores shutting down across the world, publishing itself is going to be facing one of the biggest crises ever. So, but I also believe that what will actually change and maybe trigger writers, yourself, me, to think differently, to think of different platforms through which we can deliver our voices, our expression, our books. That will never end, because the human appetite, it's insatiable. Stories are never going to end, because stories are what humanity gives hope, gives courage, inspires. It's what kind of separates us from the animal world. We have our imagination, our most precious gift. So I don't see any of that changing. Only our delivery platforms will change. And the sooner we accept that, the better, and sort of kickstart our own way of communicating. Which is why the short story platform for me was important, because it was something that was immediate. It was like a column I'm writing, which is immediate, has to be topical, making a comment on what you're going through, what the country is going through. So the short stories in that sense are a direct outcome or a reflection of just this period. But they may be speaking in a more universal way in terms of the emotional content, or the context will always be fixated in what we went through. All of us are going through what we went through during the last 60 days and counting.
And counting. I guess this is a question that obviously I must ask you, that in your opinion, and now moving a little away just from the book, to the world that we are in. What do you think will change? I'm hearing this phrase again and again, the new normal. But what is supposedly this new normal that we are talking about?
I think it's one more cliche that's been thrust upon the world. No one knows what the new normal is. It just sounds very cool to say, let's all get in touch with our new normal selves. I mean, I'm much more interested in the new abnormal, because what we're living through is anything but the expected. So the new normal is, I think, a transitional phrase to help us through till we actually come to something that all of us can sort of count on as being more in tune with what the world is going to be evolving into. It is going to be a different pattern of life. I don't see the world going back to the old. I mean, social distancing itself has created the very first big barrier and a big step in human relationships, where it's such an artificial concept that people are asked to maintain a distance. And interestingly, Swiss brothels, they're the first people, of course, they were legalized in 1942 or something like that. So they've come up with a new rule book, the Swiss brothels, for exactly what kind of sexual interaction in these new social distancing times is permissible. And those rules are going to be, in every brothel. And I suppose people who walk in will be doing what they do in brothels with masks and gloves on. That's already bizarre enough. A lot more bizarre stuff that we're going to be dealing with, which will soon become kind of standardized. So I suppose that's what people mean by the new normal. But I find it very amusing, especially when I hear very young people and all those TikTok videos where people are talking about, oh, I'm just loving this new togetherness. I mean, this lockdown has given us an opportunity to get in touch with our inner selves. It's given us time to, rejuvenate and reconnect with those who are closest to us, which is rubbish, because, there are people I know, and I know I've experienced this myself. I mean, you're ready to kill one another because you're all, like the word you use, you're all trapped, and the kind of no exit is getting to everybody. So this business of is creating more intimacy, where I don't think for right now there is that intimacy that we all crave in most of our lives. Those who are talking about it, I think, are just lying through their teeth. So the tone of most of my stories is pretty savage and is pretty brutal, because what the world is going through has been very savage and very brutal. And there's no way one can, cover it with honey and make it into a jalebi book. That was not the intention. I want to say it like it is, maybe with some amount of exaggeration, because it's going to be a very hard and tough word. Going forward.
No, I was seeing your Twitter feed a couple of hours ago, and it said lift the lockdown, lift the lockdown, lift the lockdown. So I can't remember how many times it was said, but
5 times.
So I was just wondering. I mean, honestly speaking, we seem to be stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? I mean, in the sense, on the one hand, there are those who say, no, you will need to live with the virus and the economy cannot be locked down for so long. And then there are those who are saying that, no, listen, if it spreads like wildfire in India, which it already has, in my opinion, then, there is no going back, really. So in that sense, probably... do you have some thoughts in terms of how you would have actually handled this? Would you have handled it differently?
Well, I would have. I'm not the finance minister, nor the prime minister, nor am I Amit Shah. So I'm nobody. I'm just a citizen with a viewpoint. And to me, and I'm a practical kind of a woman, and you yourself come from a business family, we know just how incredibly impacted our economy is. The business is down our ratings are down. To kickstart the economy once again is going to be a monumental and very challenging effort. So I don't have the answers. I don't have a formula. All I know is that the virus isn't going away in a hurry. It's more or less here to stay. Even if we have the vaccine in our hands, in the numbers required tomorrow morning, it still doesn't mean that even 6 months down the line, we are going to be in a position where we can say, okay, the curve is flattening. I think we haven't even seen the beginning of it in India yet. I think we are going to be, the numbers are going to be staggering when we get down to the numbers, which so far I think we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg. But for example, the way Brazil is reacting at the moment and what's happening in Brazil, we should be looking at that. They're not doing the best job, but then people can say neither are we. Who can do the best job under these circumstances? There is no ideal. Every country has to come up with its own kind of methodology. But testing is what the Western countries are saying. It's easy for, say, a country like Sweden to say, we have dealt with it, we have used the herd immunity, and we've just gone ahead and said those who are going to get it, let them get it. Well, I am of that view. I say it with some qualifications, because people are going to get it regardless. The way the migrant issue has been handled, for example, makes the entire lockdown exercise meaningless in our country. Because either the migrants stay put and we help them wherever they are staying put with resources, with food, with money, and we just can't pack them into trains when we haven't even peaked in India, and the situation in Bombay is not even, it hasn't even reached that that critical mass yet. And so it makes no sense to pack thousands and millions of people and send them back to their villages, because how are we going to control what happens and we can't control it? So I would say the statistics, even as they exist right now, are in a way a bit misleading, because we don't even know what to do with those numbers. We cannot even control those numbers. Medical system is overwhelmed. As you know, in Mumbai, we are at a point where our nurses, doctors, a lot of the nurses are not reporting on duty, have gone back to their villages. The doctors are in panic mode. A lot of doctors are also down there. They're infected. Policemen I don't know how the numbers are, quite high and distressing, who have actually died of COVID-19. It's a very tough situation. But we have statistics in many other illnesses, sicknesses across India, in Mumbai, which are equally scary. And if we are dealing with that, why can't we deal with this in exactly the same way?
Absolutely. I know exactly what you're saying, and I mean only time will tell whether these decisions that got taken at this moment, or the decisions that will get taken in the next month or two, will actually pan out in a certain direction or not. But going away from all the serious stuff now, I'm feeling awkward having this sort of serious discussion with Shobhaa Day, because we usually, whenever we are on a panel together, we end up having fun. So
let's get on to some fun too.
So I was wanting to talk to you, because now, if you really look at your own life, you start out as a model, then you go on to become a journalist, and then you eventually end up becoming a best-selling author. And then today I would consider you to be much more of an opinion maker more than anything else. I'm just wondering that at certain points of time, did you know what was around the corner, or did it just happen by sort of happenstance almost? How did these changes occur? Let's talk about that.
You missed out many years of being a full-time editor, and you missed out a publisher, which also I really enjoyed working with tremendously.
Absolutely.
And my lockdown chronicles on Insta, which I just concluded today, which were fantastic, which was also kind of a new activity inspired by the lockdown. I said, why don't I use a platform which I'm familiar with to have daily conversations with my followers and just put it out there in a way that's unstructured, unrehearsed, a one-take, 4-minute conversation, which really worked very well. I think it's very important for all of us in our lives to follow our hearts and our instinct. And I've always gone with my gut instinct. So there's been no great and grand plan. There still isn't one. I go with the moment. I'm a creature of what I'm feeling and what I think is the right thing for me to be doing, which I'll be able to do to the best of my ability. I mean, I'm not kind of in la la land that I can say, oh, at the moment I feel I could become an architect or I should become a nuclear scientist. But it all has been a continuation, my life, in some way with my basic skill sets. I haven't gone, and invented something like a lot of people may have invented something completely out of their known professional expertise. But it's not like that for me. And the modeling part, I was a very young girl, and it was something, and offers that came to me very easily, and I accepted, because for me it was really a great big cry for independence and earning my own money. It's just that. So it has always been some such trigger, but not part of some incredible big plan.
Sure. But you mentioned something right now in terms of your Insta feed and putting your views out there. But the problem sometimes also is that, the words that come to mind when one talks about Shobhaa Day is probably outspoken, probably irreverent. And I would say the third word that comes to mind is probably controversial. And in some ways, you almost revel in it. You deal with it almost effortlessly, because anyone who has an opinion is bound to be attacked in some way or the other. So what gives? What is the formula there?
No, the word that you use, revel in it, I will slightly disagree with that.
Okay.
These are my chosen, informed decisions from an extremely young age. To put myself on the line is not an act. It is the way I live my life. It has always been that. So I live with my own very strong sense of conscience and what is right and what is wrong. And I am absolutely not intimidated by controversy or criticism or trolling or any of it, because I can handle it. I'm a big girl. And I can stand by and defend whatever I've said in the public domain. So it is not something that inhibits me, has never inhibited me. So the question is, where the controversy is something that perhaps may be a fallout of taking certain positions which are not popular. But I don't write to be popular. I don't express an opinion to be popular. I'm not a politician. I'm not looking for approval. So it's not a concern of mine at all. If my views bother someone else, then it's their problem. It's not mine.
And that comes across in whether it's in your columns, whether it's in your public statements, whether it's in your fiction, that attitude of being unapologetic and being true to whatever you believe in comes across very clearly. But the reason I asked you that question was because maybe I shouldn't use the terms in times of COVID, but in general, the truth of the matter is that it's at some point of time, rather it can get overwhelming to be true to your own beliefs, and that I notice a consistency about you, that you're out there, and okay, fine, throw the brickbats, it doesn't matter, fine, I'll deal with it, and that requires a certain bit of a sort of a gutsy attitude.
Yes, I suppose it does. I mean, that's what people keep telling me, but I have never seen myself as Joan of Arc or something, or Rani of Jhansi or any of that. I don't have these sort of grandiose notions about myself. I just stick to, like you said, you to be true to your own beliefs. But you have to have those beliefs to start with, and you've got to have the integrity and the honesty to stick with those and be who you are with a certain amount of. I suppose people talk about courage and things. I don't believe in such kind of words which have so much emotional weight, like, oh, she's so gutsy, she's so courageous. I'm just being myself, and that has been consistent. It's been consistent over my professional track record of over 45 years of speaking as a public figure or writing in the public domain. So it's not something that's popped out of a box. It is who I am. So it doesn't matter to me about what the response will be. I hope that it will be in the right context and understood for what it is, rather than someone trying to create a controversy out of it.
No, I don't think so. That you can actually distinguish when someone is simply out to create a controversy, and whereas someone is simply trying to put their view out and saying, listen, guys, this is my view and I don't care. So do your best.
Yeah.
No worst.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's the worst is the interesting part, of course. It's always interesting to see to what extent someone else might go. But for example, Ashwin, I would never descend to the level of addressing or defending myself to trolls or explaining myself to anonymous people. I mean, if you're anonymous, you're a coward in my book. You either come up with a name and an identity, and you can challenge me on whichever. You disagree with me emphatically, I'm fine with all of that. I mean, that's why we should take advantage of democracy, because we can express opinions which are divergent and which are not always going with the popular stream of opinion. And otherwise, what's the point of calling yourself as a citizen of a democracy if you can't exercise that right? And every single person has that right. It's not just me.
Yeah. Tell me something. You mentioned Joan of Arc, and I don't know why it connected to Jackie Collins. Maybe it was Joan Collins, and then that connected me to Jackie Collins. I don't know, but I'm very curious about that. How that came about. I mean,
I'll tell you, because it's a story that's going to follow me to my grave. It no longer bothers me. But you know how it is when there's a lazy American journalist who comes into town on a nice fat assignment from Time magazine. He happens to be a friend of mine, and I hope he listens to this and feels thoroughly ashamed of himself. Anthony Spade, a superb writer, by the way. And he was assigned a profile piece by Time magazine when my first few books came out. And he wondered how he would make someone like me. At that time, I suppose it was considered someone like me was way ahead of their time. The persona of an Indian woman, traditionally dressed and blah, blah, blah. He thought of a way of making me accessible to dumb American readers. And the only thing he could come up with was Jackie Collins of India, because I suppose he associates a certain level of glamour. And till then, books out of India were by women were very, very few to start with, and generally had to deal with oppression, suppression, depression. That was the formula, right? You have to really suffer, and you've got to have led a terrible life, or you've got to have written books about being a child bride who was sold to her future husband, or just terrible stories of that kind. Those were the cliches out of India. So a woman with attitude, I suppose, and a woman with a certain personality, coming from a certain background, who was, like you used the word, unapologetic. I mean, these were my books, and this is the person who was writing them. I looked the way I looked, and that was it. So that's how Jackie Collins, that awful thing which is like an albatross around my neck, but no longer bothers me. But that was the genesis of that.
While you were answering that question, you used the word formula, and I was wondering. I have always believed that actually easy reading is far more difficult to achieve. I mean, from an author's point of view, to make something into an easy read is far more challenging than and I sometimes feel maybe commercial fiction authors do not get adequate credit for that they can actually make something so accessible. What do you feel?
Look, all I can tell you is there are, God knows, maybe over 100 doctorates, theses written on my work throughout this period. I don't think a lot of academics would have bothered or put my books on courses if it was seen just as something that is easy, an easy read. I don't think Simon & Schuster would be publishing me if I was just an easy read. But the simplest of books are always the most accessible of books. I'm not calling myself, someone who's writing classics. I'm writing about the world we live in the best way I can. This is the way I write. This is my style. It is not something that is acquired. It is not pretentious. It is the way I speak. It's the style that I use for my columns. When I'm interviewed, like I'm talking to you, like if I'm doing TV panel discussions, this is my way of communication. And it seems to have found a vast readership across the world, and it's been in translation across the world. So most writers claim to arrive at their style after a lot of trial and error, or perhaps many drafts, or working with editors who tell them not like this but like that. But from the word go, I was very clear that this is my voice. This has always been my voice. It was my voice at age 14, at age 15, at age 16. I have my diaries going back to those years. And yes, my thoughts have evolved over time because my experience has added to all of that. But the essential style of communication is what it is. It is not going to change. So I feel there's a lot of pretension in trying to define writers and put them into different categories of commercial writing or high art, low art, literature versus commercial fiction versus this versus that. A book is a book is a book. It finds its own readership. Like, for example, the simplicity of R.K. Narayan and the way he created Malgudi. The whole Malgudi days, of course, it remains a world classic. But his language is essentially extremely simple and very accessible. You can say the same about Ruskin Bond. I'm not trying to equate myself with these two, incredibly talented, gifted writers. But their language is what you just called accessible. And I hope that my language will remain accessible, because what I'm saying through that language is much more important. I also use a lot of subterfuge, which is sort of packaged into the simplicity of what I'm saying. I use humor. I use a lot of savage, imagery and words, which very often echo the way we actually speak to one another. But when we clean it all up and sanitize it, it emerges in a very different form.
I understand. But over the years, I mean, I think my first exposure to you was probably through Starry Nights, I guess.
The book,
way back.
Stardust, magazine.
No. It was the book. Socialite evenings. Correct. And I think that would have been what, 1980s.
Yes,
I guess.
Yes, absolutely right. Yes.
And it's not as if I wasn't reading all types of writers, but just the stark simplicity and the fact that what really got me was the fact that there was just a simplicity to the style, and you managed to maintain that even when I'm reading this latest of yours.
Yes.
There is utter simplicity in you make no bones about it. Many of those stories don't have happy endings. I mean, in fact, most of them don't. They're like, okay, fine. You're left with this question mark that, okay, will anything work out? Will anything resolve itself?
Yes.
But it's utter simplicity in writing, And that seemed. I'm just wondering, is there a formula? Is there a formula?
I often ask you that because you certainly have hit a formula which is like a winning formula, and I know how hard you work on each one of your books, and it's for you. It's really something which is a deep engagement with every book that you've written, and a lot of research goes into it, and you spend hours with yourself and doing what you do, and you do it brilliantly. For me, it's not that at all. I mean, I write from my dining table, which is where I'm speaking to you from right now. My dining table is my life, my world, my everything. My mess is on my dining table, and I like to sit here because I don't like the idea of romanticizing a writer's life. I work harder than most people I know, or even writers of my generation, but even much younger writers. I've never skipped a deadline. I'm very scrupulous about maintaining all of that. My discipline, my writing discipline. I write between 1,500 to 2,500 words a day. So
Wow.
that is my natural rhythm and pace for writing. But I don't need to make a thing out of it. I'm not one of those writers who would like to say, I need to go to a retreat in the Himalayas. I need to cut myself off from everything. I need my isolation. I need inspiration. No, this is my vocation. This is what I do.
Yeah.
This is what I love. And I often say this, that writing for me, it's like my jaan. It's my energy. It's my energy booster. It's my therapy. It's my sanity. It's my sab kuch. And that involves every aspect of my life as I live it.
Yes.
Every bit of it, whether it's being interrupted, like even now when I'm speaking to you, I'm equally conscious that dinner is being cooked in the kitchen. I know what's going to be cooked for dinner. I like to know everything. I know that my daughter is recording something in the next room. I know my husband is reading what he's reading, a few feet away from me. Everything adds to, I feel, my life. It enriches me. Isolating myself.
Is that interplay between your life and the fiction that you write? Is there? I know we are living in worlds where we are suddenly realizing that fact is stranger than fiction in some ways. But and if someone had asked me 6 months ago that do you as a conspiracy fiction writer, would you have conjured up this sort of a conspiracy idea of the sort of pandemic that we are going through? I would have said not in my wildest dreams. I mean, this is way beyond what any fiction writer would conjure. So I'm just wondering that how much of the interplay between fact and fiction happens for you? I mean, is it that because you happen to be sitting right now and writing something, and there is a particular aroma wafting from the kitchen? Will that figure into the next 100 words that you write?
1,000%. If my little Gongli, who's sitting at my feet, my wonderful, beautiful companion, the lady dog in my life, if I notice something about her which is unusual, it will come in some form into what I write in the next few hours. If I see a flower that's just bloomed outside on the windowsill, that will certainly impact me. If I'm looking at a cloud formation of a beautiful sky outside, which I am seeing right now, that will impact me too. Every single thing in some way, when you talk about, that's a lovely word, interplay. All of us are creatures of interplay. Writers more than almost anybody else. And I would say that even those who write, for example, science fiction, or like yourself, you have a very specific genre of writing. It cannot be that it's completely devoid or far removed from what you experience on a day-to-day basis. Even your mood when you come to your laptop in the morning will be in some way determined by what you've had at breakfast, whether you had an argument before that, whether the AC is working or not. Our small comforts and our big discomforts. And I also believe that words have the power to shake you up in so many ways. And for me, especially writing the lockdown liaisons, I didn't design it to make everybody uncomfortable, but discomfort was certainly a big part of creating those stories, because discomfort is what all of us are learning to live with. And how could I not have that come into the books? Because every single day, you and I, for example, in our homes, are experiencing so many little things that were not in our comfort zone, or were so much a part of our comfort zone, and suddenly we're out of it. Things we could take for granted, services we could take for granted. It's like even the air conditioner man not being allowed into your building, for example, and the air conditioner conks out. It's like pest control. I mean, how do you get pest control when you really need it so desperately? These are small things. How can you be unaffected by it? Everything affects a writer, or a painter, or a musician, or anybody in the creative field, or actually forget creative field. Everything affects everybody. Some people just know how to do that.
Your book cover says it's book 1, and when we started this talk, you said, well, book 3 is almost complete. I would hate to be under that sort of pressure where I have to meet a weekly deadline, but I guess you're used to doing it because of your columns. I mean, you're so used to cranking out a certain number of words every day or every week.
And apart from that, when I'm on a roll, especially when I'm mid-book or mid certain, there is a momentum in your mind or your thinking, and so stories are jumping out at me faster than I can even write down a story idea. And Himanjali, my calm and competent and wonderful editor at Simon & Schuster, she said to me, "You're writing faster than I can read." So, it's like a torrent. It's like a Ganga in spades or something. But it's not that.
There's the old proverb which normally says that writers can write books faster than publishers can write checks. But here we have a unique situation where Shobhaa, the editor cannot keep up with her.
Her exact words. I mean, you can check with her. But really, I feel that's maybe I've been driven by the overall tension of the times. What it's like, there is no certainty about anything. But I'm not writing under pressure, is what I want to tell you. It's not as if I'm writing to meet that deadline. It's my complete and total engagement with what we're experiencing and the stories that are exploding out of my head. It's a response to that. It's not a pressure at all. I just wish I could grow, 3 more or 4 more hands and maybe an extra brain to just keep up with what I feel I can do. I feel like I'm writing even in my sleep. It's that bad. It's like some kind of a disease.
Well, if anyone can, probably it would be you. You'll figure that one out too. But having said that, what now? I don't know. For me, at least, and this is where I would like to probably leave the discussion. End it off at this point. That for me, honestly speaking, this entire 60 days or 68 days that have gone by, it's besides the fact that it's really utterly scared me and it's depressed me in many ways. And I thank heavens for the fact that I'm a creative person. So in that sense, I still have something to do every day. But beyond that, it has also brought home my mortality. And I'm suddenly realizing that we're just hanging by a thread almost. And I always used to joke that, hey, listen, my wife says that I've lived long enough to be able to narrate all the stories that I want to narrate. So I'm just wondering that now, does it mean that you're in a race against time in terms of trying to put all those stories out there?
Not really. I'm very much like a Sufi in that sense. There is a very high level of detachment, and I don't invest that kind of that much of myself in those sort of contemplations. I float without trying to anticipate kal kya hoga, parso kya hoga, because you and I and all of us have come to the realization that nothing but nothing is known as to kal kya hoga. So we may as well live this moment. This is the moment we have, and it's precious and it's beautiful. So let's not ruin it and spoil it by thinking about what you might be able to do or not do when you wake up tomorrow morning. Let's,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I agree with you 100%. That's a wonderfully positive view, and that's precisely where I think that we should end our chat today. And I just want to once again congratulate you on this terrific effort to bring out these stories during lockdown. I mean, that in itself is an incredible endeavor. And the fact that we are for the first time seeing short stories coming out almost every week. So I really, I just want to salute you that this is incredible, and my very best wishes are with you.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure, as always. And thank you for all the sincerity that you put into this chat, because I can tell you I've been in chats where it's just, carelessness and arrogance of the person you're talking to who asks you the most inane questions. So I appreciate your time, the depth of your questions, and the opportunity that you provided to conduct this and do it with so much grace and so much charm. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Shobhaa. All the very best. You take care.